I'm Philip Sabin, and this video illustrates the gameplay of my jet duel, Total Conversion, based on design principles explained in my book, Simulating War. Jet Duel models dogfights between pairs or flights of jet fighters from 1950 to 1991, using the data and components from the late Gary Morgan's classic Flight Leader game, published by Avalon Hill in 1986. If you do not own Flight Leader, you can find the data in the game's Vassal module and Board Game Geek page, or buy an inexpensive digital copy, which will allow you also to print out the components if required. Jet Duel is a spin-off of my similar Total Conversion, Fighter Duel, which is showcased in its own video, and uses the data and components from Lee Brimacombe Wood's Wing Leader series of World War II air combat games from GMT. Both of my designs aim to complement the original games by offering a more tactical portrayal of fighter dogfights, with turns representing only 1/10 of the 30 to 45 second turn timescale in the published sims. Both use the same pair of maps to show combats over land, sea or clouds. These include a copy of Charles Kibler's beautiful map from Flight Leader, blown up to twice the height and width of the original to accommodate the counters and the tracking dice which I use to show the plane's altitude, airspeed and bank angle. A unique feature of both my conversions is the inclusion of AI rules, which automate the choices of any or all pilots on one or both sides, as in computer air combat games. This allows you to control a flight against AI adversaries, to pilot just one plane in a dogfight, or to team up and fly cooperatively instead of head-to-head. To illustrate the various features of Jet Duel, I have chosen to refight a typical asymmetric contest from early in the Vietnam War, between a pair of Mach 2 USAF Phantoms, armed only with Sparrow and Sidewinder missiles, and a pair of subsonic North Vietnamese MiG-17s, armed only with cannon. Marshall Mitchell's 1997 book Clashes is an invaluable critical analysis of air combat tactics and technology during this long war, and has had a key influence on my jet duel design. I will fly only the lead F4, with the MiGs and my own wingman handled by my AI rules. The Flight Leader counters and data tables show the respective characteristics of the MiG-17Cs and F4Cs. Our afterburning Phantoms have over twice the maximum speed of the MiGs, and a second crewman to handle our powerful radars and keep a lookout behind. But the smaller MiGs are harder to spot, have bubble canopies to aid their own lookout, and, with turn type A rather than E, are far more agile. Our AIM-9B Sidewinders rank with the earliest generation of heat-seeking missiles. But in this game, I give our radar-guided AIM-7E Sparrows all-aspect capability, as in Gary's own scenarios, if we can manage to confirm that fast-closing targets are hostile before it's too late to fire. It is at least equally justifiable to limit these Sparrows to rear hemisphere engagements to reflect their protracted launch procedures, thereby significantly reducing firing opportunities. I make both our crews experienced, while giving the MiGs a veteran leader with a green wingman. The extra value of my own jet's non-AI aircrew gives the MiGs the minimum AI handicap bonus of 0.5, but I increase their bonus to 1 for a greater challenge. I set the battle at the low altitude typical of these early contests in Vietnam, Flight Leader levels 1 to 6, with level 0 being excluded to avoid complications with the hilly terrain below 3,000 feet. For this scenario, I use counters from J.D. Webster's 1992 game The Speed of Heat by Clash of Arms. You may make your own counters, or use the flight leader counters instead. The larger white dice show each plane's flight leader level, while the smaller white dice show altitude steps from 1 to 4 within each level. Using my default setup rules, the MiGs begin higher than us at altitude 4.3, around 15,000 feet, to compensate for their poorer performance. On a d6 roll of 1, they are randomly flying from left to right across our front, with the inexperienced wingman 2 hexes, 500 meters, to his leader's left rear. He uses counter 3 rather than 2, since this allows better modelling of seniority and flight tactics when a side has 4 jets instead of 2. As shown on the green dice, the MiGs start with an airspeed of 3 hexes per turn, nearly 500 miles an hour. Thanks to our Mach 2 capability, we begin at airspeed 4, around 660 miles per hour, at altitude 2.4, around 9,500 feet. The MiGs are just coming into view 4 kilometers ahead, but they've been visible on our radar scopes for some time. So we've turned to face the contacts, and my wingman has increased his separation from me to give us more tactical options from the outset. On another d6 roll of 1, he's 2.5 kilometers off my left wing. The sun is randomly shining down from our 2 o'clock, and on a d6 roll of 3 in this damp climate, there's patchy cloud below us at level 1, shown by scattered cloud markers from wing leader. Each flight has a track sheet as shown, using markers from flight leader to record crew quality, ammo expenditure, pitch attitude, and most importantly, each plane's energy state. The available airspeed range from 2 to 4 hexes per turn is split into 40 energy increments called speed points, each equivalent to the speed gained when diving 100 meters. The speed point markers may be rotated to record half increments and so give even higher resolution. We have enough spare fuel to use our afterburners on as many turns as our maximum speed in flight leader, which equates to 20 of the up to 40 turns in the game. On each 3.4 second turn, jets fly in ascending order of their flight leader ID numbers. So my F4, number 141, is activated first. The first priority is to check if I have sufficient situational awareness, SA, to maneuver effectively. I have an SA penalty to offset my advantages over AI pilots, but my backseater's radar contact with the MiGs cancels the penalty for them being over 3 kilometers away, and on a d10 roll of 6, I easily retain SA. I would dearly love to launch a Sparrow, but to avoid friendly fire, this is forbidden until I begin close enough to confirm the contacts as hostile. I opt to pull up into a steep 2-step climb to altitude 3.2, and to weave as far left as possible to avoid closing too rapidly with the crossing contacts. The steep climb cuts my move to 3 hexes. The 500-meter climb reduces my energy by 5 speed points, and I lose 2 more due to the extra drag from my pitch-up maneuver. There is no compensatory gain from normal engine thrust, since I'm already at the F4's maximum airspeed in military power in the thicker air at this low altitude. I hence opt to light my afterburner, which gives additional speed points equal to those gained at airspeed 2. In this case, my Phantom, with its maximum speed rating of 20, gains 2.5 speed points at level 3, so my net loss falls to 4.5 speed points at the cost of 1 turn of fuel. My AI wingman's wide separation to the left means that the MiGs have just passed out of the 60-degree cone, which I use for simplicity to model dogfight radar modes. He narrowly retains SA on a roll of 2, since I am still in sight in his forward hemisphere. He makes a shallow one-step climb to altitude 3.1, while weaving right and attempting a right turn to bring the MiGs back into his 60-degree frontal arc. At airspeed 4, turn rate is limited by G constraints rather than aircraft agility, and the need to bank first means my wingman needs a D10 roll of 4 or more to turn successfully. On 4, he just succeeds in pivoting right after his 4-hex move, with the tracking dice shifted to show his right bank. The black numbers on the table show the D10 rolls needed to turn successfully. Where the Phantom's clumsiness remains problematic even at airspeed 4 is in turn drag. Not only is the F4's basic turn drag, as shown in red, 4.5 at this altitude and airspeed, as against only 3 for the nimbler MiGs, but I also double the drag of Mach 2 jets due to their higher wing loading compared to subsonic fighters. I can cut this drag by 2 in my own jet by turning gently, and my AI wingman gets a rebate of 1 as an abstract reflection of a similar capability, but he still loses 8 speed points due to his turn. His 2.5 speed point gain from lighting his burner is offset by the 2.5 point loss for his shallow climb, so the turn drag is just enough to drop his energy marker into the airspeed 3 band. The veteran MiG leader automatically retains SA, and makes an automatically successful bank and turn towards us at his optimum airspeed of 3. He gains 1 speed point for engine thrust, but loses 3 in turn drag, so his net energy falls by 2. His green wingman retains SA on a D10 roll of 4, and on a roll of 2 he just manages to follow his leader's turn despite lacking his veteran bonus. He too loses 2 net speed points. On turn 2, the MiGs begin within 3 kilometers of my jet, giving me enough confidence in their identity to try a last-moment sparrow shot before the merge. I continue my steep climb with no further pitch change cost, and I weave right to keep the MiGs in the centre of my backseater's radar cone. I stop using burner, and let the 5 speed point loss for the climb decelerate me to airspeed 3. To reflect the chronic failure rate of these early radar missiles, my rules allow them to be launched in pairs, but I treat this as a single shot with a greater chance of hitting. I target the enemy wingman, since his leader is already too close for effective head-on engagement. My attack will be resolved after my next activation. My own wingman is still too far from the MiGs to be sure they're hostile. He levels out and weaves left, with the 2.5 speed point gain for engine thrust accelerating him back to airspeed 4, even though he does not use burner. The lead MiG makes a shallow one-step dive towards me, randomly weaving left before shifting back right to keep me in his frontal arc. He gains 3.5 speed points. His green wingman rolls 1 for SA at this worst possible time, so he freezes at the sight of my missile snaking towards him and flies straight ahead behind his leader, instead of continuing his turn to present the Sparrow with a constantly changing intercept angle. He gains 1 speed point for engine thrust. On turn 3, my delight at the MiG's lack of evasive action turns to frustration, as on a similar roll of 1, I lose SA myself due to the non-AI pilot penalty. This stops me providing the continuing radar illumination needed to allow my Sparrow to home on its target, so the missile goes ballistic instead. Not only have I lost a precious opportunity to win before the contest of manoeuvre begins, but I'm also down to just 2 remaining Sparrows, after which I face the daunting challenge of reaching the 60-degree rear arc of one of the agile MiGs to fire a heat-seeking sidewinder. The 2.5 speed point gain for engine thrust accelerates me back to airspeed 4, as it did my wingman last turn. My wingman is now close enough to identify the MiGs himself, and he makes a steep climb 3 hexes towards them. He flies just far enough that my own jet is not in his radar cone to block a missile shot, so he launches his own pair of Sparrows. He could target either MiG since he's just reached the closer leader's rear hemisphere, but like me, he opts to target the trailing enemy wingman. He loses 7 speed points for the climb and pitch change, so he drops straight back to airspeed 3. The MiG leader maintains height and banks and turns towards us, losing 2 net speed points. His wingman recovers his wits and makes a diving bank and turn towards the new missile threat, gaining 0.5 speed points. On turn 4, I regain SA myself, and opt to maintain heading and altitude while weaving right past the MiGs and gaining 2.5 speed points from lighting my burner. My plan is to let my wingman tie up the MiGs while I separate from the action, turn gently back and re-engage in hope of further missile firing opportunities. My wingman retains SA, but he needs to turn again to keep his target in his radar cone, or his Sparrow will suffer the same fate as my own. He climbs steeply again and weaves 2 hexes right, and his roll of 8 exceeds the 5 or more required to make the bank and turn now that he's at altitude 4.1. He gains 4 speed points from his afterburning engines, but loses 5 for the climb and 7 for the turn, so he decelerates all the way to airspeed 2. His target remains beyond the 5 hex minimum range for his missile to arm and guide, so his Sparrow attack is now resolved. Missiles hit on a modified D10 roll of 10 or more. In this attack we get bonuses for the MiG's lack of countermeasures, the F4's dedicated radar operator, and the lack of ground clutter to complicate this ideal upward shot. But we suffer penalties for missile unreliability and the unfavourable front quarter engagement angle. Our roll of 4 rises to 5, but falls well short of what is needed. We've now used half our Sparrows to no effect, and we face a difficult challenge as the dogfight proper begins. The lead MiG dives to my wingman's altitude and turns towards him, gaining 0.5 speed points. The other MiG makes an exactly parallel move and also gains 0.5 speed points as he passes my wingman head-on. For simplicity, I do not allow frontal hemisphere gun engagements at the massive closing speeds generated by jet combat. On turn 5, I opt to continue separating away for now, gaining another 2.5 speed points in full burner. My wingman levels out and flies past the enemy wingman, rolling the 6 or more needed to continue turning at his low airspeed. He loses 1 more speed point despite keeping his burner lit. The lead MiG continues his right turn, losing 2 speed points. His green wingman loses SA again on a roll of 1 and levels his wings to regain his bearings, gaining 1 speed point. On turn 6, I bank left and begin attempting a gentle turn, but I fail for now on a roll of 2. I opt to save fuel by throttling back to military power, so there is no net energy change. My wingman loses SA on a roll of 1, since I am not in sight ahead to guide him, so he keeps flying in the opposite direction. He gains only 2 speed points at level 4, so he remains at airspeed 2 for now. The MiG leader continues his right turn after my closer wingman, losing another 2 speed points. The other MiG banks and turns left to pursue my wingman from the other side, also losing 2 speed points. On turn 7, I roll 2 for SA myself, and realise that my backseater can no longer track the lead MiG due to the angle, or his wingman due to the distance. I hence separate further when I really should be turning to re-engage. My wingman regains his bearings and succeeds in making a diving right turn towards the enemy wingman, with the net 1.5 speed point gain in full burner, returning him to airspeed 3. The lead MiG keeps turning after my wingman for 2 speed points. The green MiG pilot retains SA despite rolling 2, because his bubble canopy lets him track my wingman, and because he does not suffer for his AI leader not being in front. He turns towards my wingman for 2 more speed points. On turn 8, I regain SA and pull up into a hard, steep climbing turn in full burner to end my excessive separation. I succeed in rolling the 3 or more required, but I lose 12 speed points, even though there is no extra pitch change cost when making such a vertical turn, so I drop straight to airspeed 3. My wingman climbs back to altitude 4.1, but fails to turn to face the MiG wingman. He loses 0.5 speed points, but stays at airspeed 3. The MiG leader turns again in pursuit, with the 2 speed point loss at last cutting his airspeed to 2. His wingman turns for a front quarter pass on my wingman at a similar cost of 2 speed points. On turn 9, I cannot dive steeply back to level 3 straight after climbing steeply, so I make a shallow dive instead to altitude 4.1 while trying to continue my hard left turn. I just succeed in rolling the 4 required at this height, but I lose a further 1.5 net speed points despite my dive and my continued use of burner. My wingman levels his wings and dives steeply under the approaching MiG, gaining 5.5 speed points despite the pitch change cost. The lead MiG makes a shallow dive and turns in behind my wingman, with his net 1.5 speed point gain returning him to airspeed 3. He is still 3 kilometers away, so his lack of missiles means he's not a threat for now. The MiG wingman continues his left turn past my wingman for 2 speed points. On turn 10, I attempt a gentle diving turn to complete my half circle to re-engage, but my roll of 3 fails because of the -2 penalty when turning gently. I keep my burner lit regardless and regain 7.5 speed points, taking me almost back to airspeed 4. My wingman banks and turns towards me in full burner at a net cost of 3 speed points. The veteran MiG leader does not level his wings to pursue my distant wingman, as I'd hoped, but instead keeps turning to face me now that I am only a little further away. The 2 speed point cost drops him again to airspeed 2. His wingman also turns in my direction as he reunites with his leader, and he too drops to airspeed 2 due to the 2 speed point loss. On turn 11, I narrowly retain SA despite the small MiGs still being well outside my spotting range. I tighten my turn while diving another step, and this pays off on a roll of 4 when I turn to bring the MiGs back into my radar cone at a cost of 1.5 speed points, even in burner. My wingman is just close enough to see my large and smoky jet returning to the rescue, and he succeeds in turning again in full burner for 3 more speed points, narrowly retaining airspeed 3. Our bracketing tactics start to bear fruit when the veteran MiG pilot shifts his attention back to my closer wingman. He tries to turn back to face him, but for once he fails to turn due to the -3 penalty for reversing bank. Diving to altitude 3.3 gives him 4.5 speed points and returns him to airspeed 3. The green MiG pilot also maintains his focus on my wingman and makes a diving turn towards him, though his net 1.5 speed point gain is not quite enough to escape airspeed 2. On turn 12, I start frustratingly just beyond the 3 kilometer threshold for reconfirming the MiG's identity and launching my remaining Sparrows. I weave left to leave my wingman outside my radar cone, while throttling back slightly to limit my energy gain to 2, and so stay at airspeed 3, in the hope of being able to fire next turn. My wingman just rolls the 3 needed to continue his right turn towards the MiGs. This time, the 3 speed point loss, even in afterburner, decelerates him clearly to airspeed 2. The lead MiG pilot is torn as to which of our converging jets poses the greatest threat. He randomly opts to stay focused on my wingman, and weaves left towards him while gaining 1 more speed point. The other MiG pilot also concentrates on my closer wingman, and dives towards him while gaining 4 speed points and accelerating back to airspeed 3. On turn 13, my tactic of separating and re-engaging has paid off after all, and I can launch my remaining Sparrows at either MiG. This time I opt to target the veteran leader, since he is now further away, and, if I do not distract him, there is a very real risk of him making a cannon attack on my wingman if he fails to turn at his low airspeed. I weave right to avoid having to turn to keep the MiG in my radar cone, as my wingman did on turn 4, and I dive and light my burner to gain 7.5 speed points and accelerate to airspeed 4, ready for another separation maneuver if this attack fails. I consider launching just 1 Sparrow, so as to retain 1 for later, but I decide instead to use both, so as to maximize my chances in this existing fire opportunity. My wingman turns to face the MiGs after all, but loses 1 more speed point and another turn of spare fuel. The lead MiG banks right for a diving turn into my missile, gaining 0.5 speed points. His wingman just retains SA and flashes by my wingman in a close head-on pass, gaining 1 speed point. On turn 14, I avoid the frustration of losing SA as on turn 3, and weave straight towards the lead MiG to provide the radar echoes which my missile needs. I throttle back to military power, so there's no energy change. The engagement range just reaches the 5 hex minimum, so I can resolve the Sparrow's attack. As in my wingman Sparrow engagement on turn 4, I get bonuses for my backseater, the MiG's lack of countermeasures, and the absence of ground clutter. There are penalties for missile unreliability and the target's veteran pilot. But since my Sparrow is now in the enemy jet's frontal arc rather than front quarter, the net modifier remains the same at +1. On a D10 roll of 4, I suffer the same ill luck as my wingman, and we have little to show for 10 turns of careful manoeuvres, except depleted stocks of missiles and afterburner fuel. My wingman dives to altitude 3.2 and succeeds again in rolling the 5 or more needed to continue his right turn. He gains 1.5 speed points thanks to his afterburner. Relieved at avoiding my Sparrow, the veteran MiG pilot dives steeply to altitude 2.4 and continues turning right, gaining 3 speed points. His green wingman loses SA on a roll of 1 and flies straight ahead, gaining 1 speed point. On turn 15, I decide to exploit my energy superiority over the MiG leader by drawing him after me so that my energy-starved wingman may use his remaining missiles to attack him. I bank left and pull up into a hard, steep climbing turn. The 11.5 speed point loss, even in full burner, drops me to airspeed 3. My wingman makes another successful diving right turn in full burner, gaining 1.5 speed points as he gradually accelerates back towards airspeed 3. The lead MiG turns right to shadow me at the cost of 2 speed points. His wingman regains SA, but on a roll of 1, he unusually fails to turn right to follow his leader due to the penalty for banking. He gains 1 speed point. On turn 16, I level out and weave left to tempt the enemy leader into climbing fruitlessly in pursuit, a key tactic used by real F-4s to offset their inferiority in a horizontal turning fight, and to exploit the MiG-17's lack of missiles. I gained 2.5 speed points despite throttling back to military power. My wingman, meanwhile, has other priorities, and makes yet another successful afterburning turn to try to get behind the MiG wingman, at the cost of 1 speed point as he levels out to chase his higher opponent. The MiG leader climbs steeply, and continues turning into a perfect position for a long-range deflection shot on my jet, were he not 1 step too low. The 7 speed point loss drops him to airspeed 2. The other MiG reverses his bank and tries to turn towards rather than away from my wingman, but to my delight, his roll of 3 means that he fails to do so due to the -3 bank reversal penalty. He gains 1 speed point, but is left terribly exposed to attack by my wingman, now 2 kilometers behind in his 60-degree rear arc. On turn 17, I lose SA on a roll of 1, and fly straight ahead, gaining 2.5 speed points, which take me to airspeed 4. My wingman levels his wings and flies forward in full burner, gaining 5 speed points, which accelerate him to airspeed 3. He could launch his remaining Sparrows, but since the MiG wingman is not up sun, and at 7 hexes away is just within his maximum Sidewinder range of 4 plus his altitude level of 3, he takes advantage of his tailing position to fire a single AIM-9 instead. The veteran MiG pilot successfully reverses bank and rolls in directly behind my jet. Luckily for me, AI pilots never climb at airspeed 2, to save them being suckered into precisely the low-energy floundering which I'm trying to encourage. So the MiG does not trade even more of its scarce speed for height to allow a fleeting gunshot before I slip out of range. It still loses 1 net speed point due to its turn. It is interesting to work out the MiG's chances had it climbed after all, and had its turn roll been high enough to offset the gentle turn penalty, which is mandatory before gun attacks. It would have had bonuses for its veteran pilot and for our common heading, but penalties for the long range and for its turn, lower airspeed and poor gun sight. The resulting -2 modifier means there would have been no effect except on a roll of 10, which would have damaged my jet on a further D6 roll of 5 or 6, and which otherwise would have scored a near miss, which would have given the MiGs 1 victory point in addition to the 1 they have already from their handicap bonus. Had the attack modifier been even worse, only a green pilot would have wasted scarce cannon ammo by firing. The other MiG pilot dives steeply to try to evade my wingman's Sidewinder, but his proximity to the board edge forces him to weave right, stop short, and make an automatically successful bank reversal and turn to remain in play as per the AI rules, gaining 3 speed points. On turn 18, my SA failure persists, with neither enemy jet in sight. But my airspeed of 4 carries me well out of reach of the lead MiG, with my energy remaining unchanged. My wingman weaves to re-enter his target's rear arc, gaining 2.5 speed points. He maintains heading and launches a second follow-on Sidewinder in case the first one misses. The first AIM-9 gets bonuses for the MiG's lack of countermeasures and the absence of alternative heat sources in this co-altitude shot, but a penalty for unreliability, giving it the same +1 modifier as for the Sparrows earlier. On a roll of 3, it proves no more successful. The MiG leader continues his vain pursuit of my jet, randomly weaving left and gaining 1.5 speed points as he slowly accelerates towards airspeed 3. The green MiG pilot continues his steep dive to altitude 2.3 to evade the second AIM-9, and turns to put the missile in his rear quarter while accelerating to airspeed 4 thanks to another 3 speed point gain. On turn 19, I remain disoriented on yet another SA roll of 1, and it's just as well that my distraction manoeuvre works safely despite such problems, thanks to my clear margin of height and airspeed. If the veteran MiG pilot had atoll missiles, I would be toast. My wingman dives to altitude 2.4 and banks and turns to bring his target back into his frontal arc, losing 0.5 speed points, even in full burner. He cannot launch another missile due to his turn and the enemy jet's increasing proximity, so everything depends on his second Sidewinder. If this too misses, the growing separation of our jets and my wingman's dwindling energy and burner fuel mean that it will be hard for us to set up further shots with our remaining missiles against the agile MiGs in the 21 turns still to play. Since this second AIM-9 was fired from 2 steps above the target's current altitude, the low clouds in the background offer an unwelcome distraction, and there is now no net modifier. The near miss which we would achieve on a roll of 8 or 9 is little help, since near misses on green pilots give only 0.5 victory points, falling short of the enemy handicap of 1. However, our roll of 10 at last hits the jackpot, even though on a d6 roll of 2 the MiG is only damaged rather than downed as it would have been on 3 to 6. Losing his wingman means the MiG leader loses combat effectiveness, and after at last regaining airspeed 3 in his vain pursuit of my receding jet, he too breaks off the action, since no more missiles are in flight. This ends the game, and gives us a solid, if unspectacular, victory by 2 points to 1, thanks as much to my AI wingman as to my own pilot, whose repeated loss of SA limited his own contribution. The game showed well how the F-4s could use energy tactics to stay out of reach of the agile MiG's cannon, while employing their large missile stocks to offset the poor performance of individual rounds. As Michel makes plain, the biggest weakness of USAF Phantoms was the limited training of their crews in air-to-air combat, reducing their ability to employ the cooperative formation tactics which are key to success in jet duel. Despite possessing significant asymmetric advantages, the MiG-17s historically proved unable to combat the F-4s on even terms at altitude, and eventually resorted to forming defensive circles at low level, where the clouds and ground clutter precluded long-range engagement and created a more balanced contest. The advent of faster MiG-19s and MiG-21s with their own missiles also negated the Phantom's simple early energy tactics and created fascinating new dynamics which jet duel allows players to explore. Vietnam is only one of the many aerial conflicts you can simulate in jet duel. These range from pure gunfights over Korea in 1950 to 53, to contests between sophisticated Mach 2 jets with the latest all-aspect missiles during the 1991 Gulf War, all based on the rich database provided in Flight Leader. Robert Shaw's 1985 book Fighter Combat, posted free online, offers a great detailed guide to the changing tactics required across this long era as technology developed. Since the jet age coincided with the Cold War rather than the all-out hostilities of the earlier world wars, many jet types saw fewer real combats than mock combats, like those made famous by the 1986 movie Top Gun. Jet duel lets you refight such mock combats by replacing the sudden death hit rolls of the main game by the accumulation of hit points. This lets you pit any jet types against one another in contests governed more by player skill than by the blend of skill and luck which adds such drama and unpredictability to the main game system. Jet Duel is only one of the new free air games I've designed since posting the deluxe editions and gameplay videos of my Dogfight, Fighter Duel and Canvas Aces trilogy in 2021. I have also recently created Dogfight Full Circle, which is showcased in its own video, and which expands Dogfight to a 360-degree top-down 3D perspective like that in Jet Duel and in my original generic Angels 1.5 design. For those who prefer greater simplicity and abstraction, my new Fighter Duel Light and Counter-Air games model generic World War II fighter tactics and modern attacks on integrated air defences incorporating jets, SAMs and AAA. These last two designs are notable not only for their simplicity, but also for a complete absence of luck, making them challenging chess-like contests in which player skill alone determines who will prevail. For more details of these and my many other designs, just Google Sabin Wargames. It remains only to thank Gary Morgan and Craig Taylor for the simple and well-researched data in Flight Leader. Both designers are sadly missed, and Jet Duel is dedicated to their memory. I'm also indebted to game artists like Charlie Kibler for the beautiful components which I've incorporated into my own Jet Duel playset. Like my other free conversions, Jet Duel shows how much added enjoyment may be had from the best existing game systems and components, without adding to the glut of new freestanding board games competing for players' attention. I hope that this video encourages you to try my designs, or to discover the fun of tweaking games to your own personal satisfaction.